It is 60,000 years ago. A group of stocky, powerful humans sits around a fire deep inside a cave in what we now call Slovenia. The flames flicker against the limestone walls. One of them picks up a bone, a thigh bone from a young cave bear. This bone has holes in it. They bring it to their lips and blow. A haunting sound echoes through the chamber. Did this actually happen? Did Neanderthals, our closest extinct relatives, make music? This question has sparked one of the biggest debates in archaeology over the past 3 decades. The answer matters because it tells us something profound about who the Neanderthals really were. Were they brutish cavemen who could barely think beyond their next meal? Or were they complex beings capable of art, language, and yes, music? Let us start at the beginning. In 1995, archaeologists were digging in a cave called Divje Babe in Slovenia. The name translates to something like witch cave. They found something strange. It was the thigh bone of a juvenile cave bear, but this bone had holes punched through it, not just random holes. These holes were lined up in a row along one side of the bone. The bone was found near an ancient hearth in a layer of sediment associated with Neanderthal occupation. Ivan Turk, the archaeologist who led the excavation, looked at this bone and thought it might be a flute. The holes were spaced in a way that looked deliberate. They were circular rather than oval. They were positioned where fingers would naturally fall if you were holding the bone like a wind instrument. The bone even appeared to have a sharpened edge at one end that could serve as a mouthpiece. If this was indeed a flute made by Neanderthals, it would be revolutionary. It would be the oldest musical instrument ever found. More than that, it would show that Neanderthals were capable of symbolic thought and artistic expression, abilities long thought to be unique to our own species. The bone has been dated to somewhere between 50,000 and 60,000 years ago using electron spin resonance dating. This is at least 10,000 years older than any other known musical instruments, which were made by modern humans in Germany around 40,000 years ago. Today, the artifact sits in the National Museum of Slovenia in Ljubljana, displayed proudly as a Neanderthal flute. But here is where things get complicated. Not everyone agrees that this bone is a flute at all. Some scientists looked at the same bone and saw something completely different. They saw a piece of cave bear leg that had been chewed on by hyenas or wolves. In the Ice Age, these carnivores were common in European caves. They gnawed on bones to extract marrow and nutrients. Their teeth, especially the powerful cheek teeth of hyenas, could punch holes through the soft bones of young animals. Francesco Derrico, an archaeologist who examined the bone firsthand in 1998, compared it to other cave bear bones from sites where no humans had ever lived. He found bones with similar holes that were clearly made by animals. The holes on the supposed flute, he argued, did not show the typical signs of human manufacture like cut marks from stone tools. Plus, both ends of the bone showed clear signs of carnivore gnawing. April Noel, an archaeologist from the University of Victoria in Canada, has studied this debate for years. She points out something important. Of the 600 cave bear thigh bones found at Divje Babe, this is the only one with these supposed artificial holes. If Neanderthals were making flutes, why would there be only one? Why no other attempts, no failures, no other examples? In 2015, a German paleobiologist named Cages Diedrich published a study examining bone breakage patterns from 15 different European cave sites. He concluded that the punctures on bones, like the Divje Babe artifact, were consistent with Ice Age hyena teeth, not human tools. The soft bones of young cave bears, he argued, were especially vulnerable to being punctured by the powerful jaws of these predators. But the defenders of the flute theory have not given up. Matija Turk, continuing the work started by his father Ivan Turk, has conducted extensive experiments. His team tried to replicate the holes using wolf, hyena, and bear dental casts on fresh juvenile bear bones. They found that carnivore teeth could not produce holes that were so perfectly aligned in a straight row down the middle of the bone. The mathematical odds of random chewing producing such regular spacing, they argue, are simply too low. Musicologist Bob Fink analyzed the spacing of the holes and found something remarkable. If you assume the original bone had 4 or 5 holes before it was damaged, the spacing produces notes that fit within a standard musical scale. The notes, he wrote, are inescapably diatonic. They would sound like a near-perfect fit within any kind of standard scale, whether ancient or modern. Is this a coincidence? Fink calculated that the number of ways for random holes could be differently spaced to produce different sets of tones is 680. The odds that random chewing would produce musical intervals are extremely small. The Slovenian National Museum commissioned a reconstruction of the instrument. A Slovenian musician named Ljuban Dimkarovski has played this reconstruction in concerts, performing everything from folk melodies to pieces by Beethoven and Albinone. The sound is haunting and beautiful. The reconstruction demonstrates that the bone, in its original complete form, could have produced a wide range of notes and was ergonomically designed for a right-handed player. But here is the thing. Even if we accept that the Divje Babe bone was used as a flute, we still do not know for certain that Neanderthals made it. Some critics point out that while the bone was found in a layer associated with Neanderthal stone tools, it is possible that animals gnawed it at a different time, or that the association is coincidental. So let us step back from this one controversial artifact and ask a broader question. Did Neanderthals have the biological equipment necessary to make and appreciate music? To answer this, we need to understand how music works. Music requires several things. You need the ability to produce sounds, either with your voice or with an instrument. You need the ability to hear and process those sounds. You need the cognitive ability to understand patterns, rhythms, and melodies. And you might need language, or at least something like it, to coordinate musical activities with others. Let us start with the voice. Could Neanderthals sing? For a long time, scientists believed that Neanderthals could not speak or sing like modern humans. This was based on studies of their skull anatomy. In the 1970s, researcher Philip Lieberman argued that Neanderthals had a flat skull base and a high voice box, similar to apes, which would have prevented them from producing the full range of human speech sounds. But this view has been challenged by new evidence. One of the most important pieces of evidence comes from a small bone called the hyoid. The hyoid is a horseshoe-shaped bone that sits in your throat just below your jaw. It is the anchor point for muscles and ligaments that are crucial for speech and swallowing. The hyoid is the only bone in your body that does not connect to any other bone. It just floats there, attached only to soft tissue. Because the hyoid is small and delicate, it rarely survives in the fossil record. But in 1989, archaeologists found a nearly complete Neanderthal skeleton in Kebara cave in Israel. This skeleton, known as Kebara II, included a beautifully preserved hyoid bone. When scientists examined it, they were surprised. The Neanderthal hyoid was almost identical in size and shape to the hyoid of modern humans. It was completely different from the hyoid of chimpanzees, which have a large bulge called a bulla that prevents them from making human-like sounds. This discovery suggested that Neanderthals had the basic equipment for speech, but did they actually use it? In 2013, a team of researchers took the analysis further. They did not just look at the outside shape of the Kebara to hyoid. They used micro-CT scanning to examine its internal structure. Inside bones are tiny structures called trabeculae, little struts of bone tissue that develop in response to the forces placed on the bone over a lifetime. The internal architecture of a bone can tell you how it was used. The researchers found that the internal structure of the Neanderthal hyoid was remarkably similar to that of modern humans. The bone had been used in very similar ways. This suggests that the Kebara II Neanderthal was doing something with their throat that required the same kinds of muscle movements we use when we speak. While this does not prove they had complex language, it shows they had the hardware for sophisticated vocal control. But speech and music require more than just a voice box. They also require the ability to hear. In 2021, a major study was published in Nature, Ecology and Evolution that examined Neanderthal hearing. The research team, led by Mercedes Conde Valverde from the University of Alcalá in Spain, used high-resolution CT scans to create three-dimensional models of the ear structures in Neanderthal skulls. They compared these to the ear structures of modern humans and to earlier human ancestors from the site of Cima de los Huesos in Spain, who lived around 430,000 years ago and are thought to be ancestors of the Neanderthals. The results were clear. Neanderthals had hearing abilities that were very similar to modern humans. Specifically, they could hear in the frequency range of 4 to 5 kHz, which is exactly the range where human speech sounds occur. They had what scientists call a wide occupied bandwidth, meaning they could distinguish many different sounds within this range. This is crucial for understanding speech, where tiny differences in sound can completely change meaning. The occupied bandwidth is directly related to the efficiency of a communication system. A wider bandwidth means you can pack more distinct signals into your communication. The Neanderthals showed a wider bandwidth than their ancestors from Cima de los Huesos, and it was essentially identical to modern humans. The researchers concluded that Neanderthals possessed the ability to perceive and produce human speech. Their ears were tuned to the frequencies of speech. This does not prove they had language as complex as ours, but it shows they had evolved sophisticated auditory processing that would be useful for both speech and music. Rolf Quam, an anthropologist at Binghamton University who was part of this study, called it one of the most important studies of his career. The results, he said, are solid and clearly show that Neanderthals had the capacity to perceive and produce human speech. Now, let us talk about genetics. Is there a music gene? And did Neanderthals have it? In 2001, scientists discovered that mutations in a gene called FOXP to cause severe problems with speech and language in humans. A British family known as the K family had about half its members affected by these mutations. They had trouble with grammar, writing, comprehension, and especially with coordinating the complex movements of the face and mouth needed for fluid speech. FOXP2 was quickly dubbed the language gene, though this is a bit of an oversimplification. The gene is actually a transcription factor, meaning it controls the activity of many other genes. It is found in many animals, not just humans. Birds need it for learning songs. Bats need it for echolocation. But the human version of FOXP2 differs from the version in chimpanzees by 2 specific amino acid changes. In 2007, scientists extracted DNA from well-preserved Neanderthal bones found in El Sidrón cave in Spain. They sequenced the FOXP2 gene and found something remarkable. Neanderthals had the same human version of FOXP2. They had both of the amino acid changes that distinguish human FOXP2 from chimpanzee FOXP2. This was a significant finding. It suggested that whatever role FOXP2 plays in enabling language and speech, Neanderthals had the same version we do. The common ancestor of Neanderthals and modern humans, who lived around 300,000 to 400,000 years ago, must have already had this version of the gene. Johannes Krauss, a geneticist at the Max Planck Institute who worked on this study, put it plainly. From the point of this gene, there is no reason to think that Neanderthals did not have language as we do. However, FOXP2 is just one gene among many involved in language and probably music. More recent genetic studies have complicated the picture. A 2018 analysis of diverse human genomes found no evidence of recent positive selection on FOXP2 in modern humans, challenging the idea that this gene underwent a recent selective sweep that gave us superior language abilities. Some regulatory changes in FOXP2 that are found in modern humans are absent in Neanderthals, suggesting there may be subtle differences in how the gene is expressed. Other genes involved in language and learning show similar patterns. Some variants are shared between Neanderthals and modern humans, suggesting ancient common inheritance. Others appear to be unique to our lineage. The genetics of language and music are turning out to be far more complex than anyone imagined. Let us move beyond biology and ask what the archaeological record tells us. Did Neanderthals show other signs of symbolic thinking that might suggest they were capable of music? For a long time, the answer was thought to be no. Neanderthals were seen as capable toolmakers, but lacking in creativity. They used the same basic stone tool technology for hundreds of thousands of years without much innovation. They did not seem to make art or ornaments. They were practical survivors, but not symbolic thinkers. This view has been completely overturned in recent years. In 2018, a team of researchers published stunning results in the journal Science. They had used a technique called uranium-thorium dating to determine the ages of cave paintings in 3 Spanish caves, La Pasiega, Maltravieso, and Ardua. These caves contain various paintings, including hand stencils, geometric shapes, and abstract symbols. The dates came back at more than 64,000 years old. Modern humans did not arrive in Europe until around 40,000 years ago. This means the paintings were made by Neanderthals. The implications were profound. If Neanderthals were painting on cave walls, they had symbolic capabilities far beyond what anyone had imagined. Creating cave art requires planning. You need to gather pigments. You need to bring a light source into the dark depths of a cave. You need to conceptualize an image and then execute it on a rock surface. At La Pasiega, the paintings include a ladder-shaped symbol made of red horizontal and vertical lines. At Maltravieso, someone pressed their hand against the wall and blew red pigment around it to create a stenciled handprint. At Ardell's curtain-like rock formations were decorated with red paint. Alistair Pike, an archaeologist at the University of Southampton who co-led the study, said the finding was extraordinarily important. If you asked 100 representative archaeologists whether Neanderthals painted caves, 90% would have said no. Now we had evidence that they did. Not everyone accepts these dates. A 2020 paper by 44 researchers criticized the Spanish cave art dating, arguing that the uranium-thorium method might not be reliable in these particular contexts, and that there is still no convincing archaeological evidence that Neanderthals created Iberian cave art. The debate continues, but cave painting is not the only evidence for Neanderthals' symbolic behavior. In the same year, another study reported on artifacts from Cueva de los Aviones, a sea cave in southeastern Spain. Researchers found perforated seashells, colored with red and yellow pigment, dating to 115,000 years ago. Some shells appeared to have been used as containers for mixing pigments. Shell beads and painted objects are widely recognized as signs of symbolic behavior. When we find similar objects at African sites associated with early modern humans, we interpret them as body ornaments, jewelry, signs of personal identity. The Spanish shells are older than any such objects found in Africa and were clearly made by Neanderthals. Joe Ozilhau, an archaeologist at the University of Barcelona, was direct about the implications. The Aviones finds are the oldest such objects of personal ornamentation known to this day anywhere in the world. They predate by 20 to 40,000 years anything remotely similar known from the African continent. And they were made by There is more. In Croatia, Neanderthals harvested eagle talons and made them into necklaces. At sites in Gibraltar and Italy, they hunted birds for their feathers, possibly to wear as ceremonial headdresses or capes. In France, at a cave called Bruniquel, Neanderthals ventured deep underground more than 300 meters from the entrance, into pitch darkness where they needed to bring their own light, and built mysterious circular structures from broken stalagmites around 176,000 years ago. Why would anyone do this? We do not know. It might have been ritual. It might have been art. Whatever it was, it shows Neanderthals were capable of complex planning, spatial organization, and behavior that seems to have no practical purpose. That is remarkable. So where does this leave us on the question of music? Here is my view. Even if we set aside the controversial Divje Babe Flute entirely, the evidence strongly suggests that Neanderthals had all the biological equipment needed for music. They had voice boxes that could produce a wide range of sounds. They had ears that were tuned to exactly the frequencies used in speech and singing. They had the same version of the FOXP2 gene that we have. Their brains, one organized somewhat differently from ours, were just as large and were clearly capable of complex symbolic thought. We know they painted caves. We know they made jewelry. We know they built mysterious underground structures for reasons we cannot fathom. We know they buried their dead, which implies abstract thinking about life and death. Is it really a stretch to imagine they also made music? Music does not require instruments. The first and most natural musical instrument is the human voice. Singing, humming, and whistling require no technology at all. The oldest Neanderthal hyoid bone with modern human form has been dated to 60,000 years ago, predating the oldest bone flutes by tens of thousands of years. If Neanderthals could speak, they could probably sing. Rhythm is even more basic than melody. Clapping hands, slapping thighs, stamping feet, banging rocks together. These activities require no special anatomy or tools. The noises produced by work, like pounding seeds or roots into meal, are a likely source of rhythm created by early humans. Any group of Neanderthals working together would naturally fall into rhythmic patterns. April Knoll, despite being skeptical of the Divje Babe Flute, acknowledges this. Neanderthals may have made music without instruments, by clapping their hands or slapping their bodies, she says. They may also have used instruments made of materials that decomposed. Wood, reeds, stretched animal skins. All of these could make musical instruments that would leave no trace in the archaeological record. We tend to think of the archaeological record as a complete picture of the past. It is not. It is a tiny, biased sample. Only things made of stone, bone, or in rare conditions preserved organic materials survive tens of thousands of years. Look around you right now. Your clothes, your furniture, the pictures on your walls. Almost everything in your environment would decay completely within a few thousand years, let alone 50,000. Yet we expect to find complete evidence of Neanderthal cultural life from fragments of stone and bone. Wood is far easier to carve than bone or ivory. Do we really think the first time anyone carved a musical instrument, they chose hard materials? It is far more likely that wooden flutes, drums, and rattles existed for thousands of years before anyone thought to make them from more durable materials. There is also the question of why Neanderthals might have made music. One prominent theory about the evolution of music in humans is that it served a social bonding function. Robin Dunbar, an evolutionary psychologist at Oxford, has argued that as human groups grew larger, we needed new ways to maintain social bonds that went beyond the one-on-one grooming behaviors used by other primates. Music, with its ability to synchronize the emotions and movements of large groups simultaneously, was one solution. If this theory is correct, Neanderthals would have needed music just as much as we did. They lived in challenging environments. They hunted large and dangerous animals. They survived ice ages. All of this required cooperation, and cooperation requires social bonds. Stephen Mithun, an archaeologist at the University of Reading, wrote a whole book about this called The Singing Neanderthals. He proposed that Neanderthals had a sophisticated communication system that was in some ways more musical than ours. This system, which he called standing for holistic, manipulative, multimodal, musical, and mimetic, would have included expressive vocalizations, iconic gestures, dance, and body movement. It would have been highly emotional and effective for coordinating group activities. Mithun argued that the challenging lives of Neanderthals, with their physically demanding environment, large bodies, and dependent infants, required complex emotional communication and intergroup cooperation. Music would have been perfect for this. Now, let me address the skeptics who say Neanderthals could not have been musical because they went extinct while we survived. The argument goes like this. If Neanderthals were so smart and creative, why are we here and they are not? Does not their extinction prove they were inferior? This argument is flawed for several reasons. First, extinction does not equal inferiority. More than 99% of all species that have ever lived are extinct. The dinosaurs dominated the planet for 165 million years before going extinct. Neanderthals survived for at least 300,000 years, thriving across Europe and Western Asia through multiple ice ages. That is a remarkable track record. Second, the reasons for Neanderthal extinction are still debated. Climate change, competition with modern humans, disease, demographic factors, interbreeding that absorbed them into our population. These are all proposed explanations. None of them require Neanderthals to have been cognitively inferior. Third, and this is the most important point, we actually have Neanderthal genes inside us right now. Modern humans of European or Asian descent carry between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA. We did not simply replace them, we interbred with them. Their genes live on in us. Some researchers argue that we should not even consider Neanderthals a separate species. Joe Zilhau, based on the evidence of their cognitive abilities and our interbreeding, concluded that Neanderthals were cognitively indistinguishable from modern humans, and the Neanderthal versus sapiens dichotomy is therefore invalid. Neanderthals were Homo sapiens too, he said. Let me return to the Divje Babe Flute one more time, because it really is the crux of this whole debate. Recent analyses have continued to support the idea that it is a genuine instrument. Micro-CT scanning revealed that there were originally 4 holes in the bone and that a thin layer of bone was removed around each hole, suggesting human intervention to facilitate pursing. The position of the holes, precisely aligned along the center of the bone shaft, remains difficult to explain by random carnivore gnawing. Ivan Turk spent decades defending his interpretation. Before his death, he assembled a team that conducted exhaustive experimental tests. They tried to replicate the holes using metal, dental casts of wolves, hyenas, and bears on fresh juvenile bare bones. They could not produce holes that matched. The alignment was always wrong. The shape was always wrong. Meanwhile, they showed that stone and bone tools of the type found in the Mousterian levels of Divje Babe could produce morphologically identical holes without leaving conventional traces of manufacture. The technique involved carving a small hollow with a pointed stone tool and then punching through with a bone or. Luben Dymkowski, the musician who plays reconstructions of the instrument, has become something of an ambassador for the Neanderthal flute. His performances demonstrate its musical capability, the range of notes it can produce, the quality of its tone. These things are hard to explain if the object is just a randomly gnawed bone. But I want to be honest with you. The scientific community remains divided. Many paleoanthropologists accept that the Divje Babe artifact is probably a carnivore chewed bone. The debate shows no signs of being resolved soon. We may need to find additional examples of similar objects before we can draw firm conclusions. What we can say is this: even if the Divje Babe bone is not a flute, that does not mean Neanderthals did not make music. It just means we have not found their instruments yet. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The oldest confirmed musical instruments were made by modern humans in Germany around 42,000 to 43,000 years ago. These are flutes carved from vulture bones and mammoth ivory, found in caves like Hohol Fels, Geisenklasterl, and Vogelhard. They show clear evidence of careful tool work. No one disputes that they are musical instruments. These instruments were found alongside some of the oldest known figurative art, including the famous Venus of Hohol Fels. They suggest that the humans who made them had a rich cultural life that included music. But does this mean Neanderthals lacked such a culture? Nicholas Kennard, the archaeologist who discovered the German flutes, has suggested that music making might have helped modern humans strengthen social bonds, which allowed them to organize their societies and expand more effectively than Neanderthals. But this is speculation. The German flutes date to just after Neanderthals went extinct in Europe. We cannot know what musical traditions Neanderthals might have had because we have not found their instruments, if they made any from durable materials at all. Let me step back and think about what music really is. Music is organized sound. It involves pitch, rhythm, timbre, and dynamics. It can be produced by voices, by instruments, or by the body. It exists in every human culture that has ever been documented. Even the most isolated peoples on Earth have music. Music serves many functions. It helps mothers bond with infants through lullabies. It coordinates group activities like work and warfare. It marks important events like births, deaths, and coming-of-age ceremonies. It expresses emotions that words cannot capture. It creates and reinforces group identity. It simply brings pleasure. All of these functions would have been useful to Neanderthals. Their lives were challenging. Their infant mortality was high. Their groups needed to cooperate to survive. Emotions needed expression. Ceremonies may have marked important transitions. We know Neanderthals cared for their sick and injured. We know they buried their dead. These behaviors suggest emotional depth and social bonds that would be served by music. We know their brains were as large as ours, though organized differently. Research suggests they had larger visual areas, probably because they evolved at high latitudes where light was limited. But they also had large frontal lobes and the neural pathways needed for complex behavior. A 2018 study using CT scans of Neanderthal skulls suggested they had a relatively smaller cerebellum than modern humans. The cerebellum is important for both motor skills and higher cognition, including language, processing, and social abilities. This might have meant subtle differences in how they processed certain kinds of information, but it does not mean they were incapable of music. The truth is, we cannot know exactly what was in Neanderthal minds. We can examine their bones and teeth. We can sequence their DNA. We can study their tools and the rare traces of their artistic activities. But thoughts, feelings, and melodies leave no fossils. What we can do is reason from the evidence we have. And that evidence increasingly suggests that Neanderthals were not the brutish cavemen of old stereotypes. They were intelligent, adaptable, creative beings who thrived for hundreds of thousands of years in some of the most challenging environments on Earth. Did they sit around campfires singing songs? Did mothers hum lullabies to their babies? Did young Neanderthals drum on logs or blow through hollow reeds? We cannot prove it, but the evidence suggests it is likely. The stereotype of the artless Neanderthal and the artistic, modern human has deep roots in 19th century prejudices. When the first Neanderthal fossils were found in the 1850s, many scientists could not believe these beings were related to us. They were described as ape-like, primitive, incapable of higher thought. This view persisted for over a century. But every decade brings new discoveries that force us to revise our understanding. The cave paintings in Spain, the shell jewelry, the eagle talon necklaces, the underground stalagmite circles, the human-like hyoid bone, the speech-tuned hearing, the FOXP2 gene. Each piece of evidence tells us the same thing. Neanderthals were more like us than we ever imagined. So did Neanderthals make music? Here is my answer. Almost certainly yes. Not because we have definitive proof in the form of undisputed instruments, though the Divje Babe Flute might be exactly that, but because they had everything needed to make music. The voice, the hearing, the brain, the symbolic thinking, the social life that would benefit from musical bonding, the emotional depth evident in their care for others. To imagine that all of these capacities existed without ever being used for musical expression seems stranger than imagining they sang and drummed and danced around fires, just as we do. The question, did Neanderthals make music, is really part of a bigger question. Who were the Neanderthals? Were they a separate species destined for extinction because of their limitations? Or were they, as some now argue, a variant of humanity, differing from us in some ways, but fundamentally the same in others? The evidence increasingly supports the second view. Neanderthals were human. Their genes live in us. Their paintings remain on cave walls. Their ornaments suggest they cared about beauty and identity. And somewhere, in the echoes of a Slovenian cave, the notes of their music may still linger in a bone that was once a flute. We may never know for certain. But in science, as in music, uncertainty can be beautiful. It drives us to keep searching, keep questioning, keep trying to understand the beings who came before us and what they might teach us about ourselves. That bone in Ljubljana, with its mysterious holes and its haunting potential, represents something more than an archaeological puzzle. It represents our deep human desire to connect with our ancestors, to know that they laughed and cried and wondered about the world just as we do. It represents the hope that even across tens of thousands of years, across the vast gulf of extinction, some part of their experience might still reach us. Maybe that is what music is for, to bridge the unbridgeable, to connect the unconnectable, to say to those who came before and those who will come after that they were here, that they mattered, that their voices deserve to be heard. If Neanderthals made music, they were doing exactly what we do every time we sing a song or listen to a melody. They were saying, I am here, I feel, I create, I matter. And that, more than any bone or gene or cave painting, is what makes them our kin. Let me know in the comments what you think. Did Neanderthals make music? Do you believe the Divje Babe bone is a flute? I read every comment and I love hearing your perspectives on these big questions about human origins. Before I move on to the conclusion, I want to address one more fascinating angle. What can modern studies of music and the brain tell us about ancient musical abilities? When neuroscientists study music perception and production in living humans, they find that music activates many different brain regions. Listening to music lights up areas involved in auditory processing, emotion, memory, movement, and reward. Making music engages motor areas, planning areas, and regions involved in coordinating complex sequences of actions. One of the most important findings is that music and language share many neural resources. Both involve processing sequences of sounds over time. Both require attention to pitch, timing, and structure. Both engage Broca's area in the frontal lobe, which was long thought to be exclusively for language. Brain damage that affects language often affects music too, though not always in the same ways. This overlap suggests that music and language may have evolved together, or at least that they are built on shared cognitive foundations. If Neanderthals had the neural infrastructure for language, which the evidence increasingly suggests they did, they probably also had the infrastructure for music. There is also fascinating research on rhythm and the brain. Humans have an unusual ability to synchronize movements to a beat. We can tap our feet to music, clap in time with others, and dance together. This ability is called rhythmic entrainment. It is rare in the animal kingdom. Parrots can do it. Some sea lions can. A few other species show hints of it. But humans are exceptionally good at it. Rhythmic entrainment seems to be connected to the motor system in the brain. When we hear a beat, our motor cortex becomes active even if we are not moving. We simulate the movements that would produce the rhythm. This is why it is so hard to sit still during a catchy song. Your brain is already moving, even if your body is not. The neural systems involved in rhythmic entrainment are very old in evolutionary terms. They are shared with other primates and probably were present in the common ancestor of Neanderthals and modern humans. This means Neanderthals almost certainly had the basic capacity for rhythmic entrainment. They could tap to a beat. They could coordinate their movements with others. They could dance. Dancing leaves no archaeological trace. But if Neanderthals could dance, they could make rhythmic music to dance to. Simple percussion, clapping, stamping, banging on things. These require no special instruments or tools, just bodies and a sense of rhythm. There is another line of evidence that I find particularly compelling: the neuroscience of social bonding through music. When people make music together, their brains become synchronized. EEG studies have shown that musicians playing together show coordinated neural activity. Their brain waves align. They become, in a very real sense, neurally connected. This synchronization is mediated partly by the hormone oxytocin, which is involved in trust, bonding, and social connection. Making music together increases oxytocin levels. So does listening to music with others. The endorphin system is also involved. Making music triggers endorphin release, creating a natural high that reinforces social bonding. These neurochemical systems are ancient. Oxytocin is found in all mammals. Endorphins are present in all vertebrates. The neural machinery for social bonding through coordinated activities was in place long before Neanderthals evolved. Given this, it would be surprising if Neanderthals did not engage in some form of musical or proto-musical social bonding. Their survival depended on cooperation. They faced harsh environments and dangerous prey. Groups that bonded tightly would have had advantages over groups that did not. If music was a tool for bonding, natural selection would have favored individuals who were musical. Now let me talk about what we can learn from modern hunter-gatherer societies. Anthropologists have studied music in hunter-gatherer cultures around the world. These societies are not perfect analogues for ancient peoples, but they give us insight into the kinds of music that emerge in small-scale societies living from hunting and gathering. A few patterns emerge. First, music in these societies is almost universally participatory. It is not something a few performers do while others watch. Everyone joins in. There are no audiences, only participants. Second, music is deeply integrated with movement. Singing and dancing go together. Rhythmic activities are accompanied by rhythmic sounds. The body and the voice are the primary instruments. Third, music serves social functions. It is used in rituals, in healing ceremonies, in teaching children, in coordinating group activities, in resolving conflicts, and in marking transitions like births, coming of age, marriages, and deaths. Fourth, the music tends to be repetitive, with short phrases repeated many times, often with variations. This makes it easy to learn and easy to participate in, even if you do not know the exact song. If Neanderthal music existed, it probably shared these characteristics. It would have been participatory rather than performed. It would have involved the body as much as the voice. It would have served social purposes. And it would have been relatively simple and repetitive rather than complex and composed. This kind of music does not require instruments. It does not require notation. It does not even require a highly developed language. It requires only voices, bodies, and a sense of rhythm and melody. All of these were available to Neanderthals. I should also mention the geographic spread of the Divje Babe debate. The Slovenian artifact is the most famous potential Neanderthal instrument, but it is not the only bone with holes from Neanderthal sites. Similar perforated bones have been found at other locations across Europe. Some are probably carnivore-gnawed, but the pattern raises questions. If carnivores were regularly creating flute-like objects by chewing on bones, we should see many of them. If Neanderthals were occasionally making flutes from bones, we should also see a few. The presence of multiple perforated bones does not tell us which explanation is correct, but it does tell us that bone flutes are at least physically possible to produce either way. What we need is an unambiguous find, a bone with clear-cut marks showing deliberate shaping, a bone found in a context where carnivore activity can be ruled out. Multiple bones found together suggesting a cache of instruments. A bone with residue on it suggesting it was blown through. Such a find may still be waiting to be discovered. Or it may not exist because Neanderthals never made bone instruments. The absence of such a find to date does not prove anything one way or the other. It just means we do not have certainty. Science is comfortable with uncertainty, or at least it should be. The honest answer to the question, did Neanderthals make music, is we do not know for sure. The evidence suggests they probably did, but we cannot prove it. That is okay. It leaves room for future discovery. Let me close by coming back to where we started. That cave in Slovenia. That bone with holes. I have stood in museums looking at ancient artifacts. There is something profound about being in the presence of an object that was last touched by human or Neanderthal hands tens of thousands of years ago. You feel connected across time. You imagine the life that object was part of. If the Divje Babe bone is a flute, imagine the life it was part of. Imagine the Neanderthal who made it. They went hunting, killed or scavenged a young cave bear, butchered it for meat. But they saved the thigh bone. Why? Because they knew what it could become. They took a stone tool and carefully carved small hollows where the holes would go. They took a bone punch and pushed through the soft bone. Each hole lined up perfectly with the others. Each hole sized for a fingertip. They shaped one end into a mouthpiece. They tested it, adjusted it, tested again. Then one evening around a fire, they brought it to their lips and played. The first notes echoed off the cave walls. Others listened. Maybe they clapped along. Maybe they sang. Maybe they danced. The music rose into the night air, over the trees, under the stars. It said everything that words could not. I am here. I am alive. I feel. The fire burned low. The song ended. Everyone went to sleep. The next day, or the next year, or the next decade, something happened. The flute was lost or discarded. Sediment covered it. Time passed. Ice ages came and went. Species rose and fell. The flute lay in the dark, waiting. Then one day in 1995, an archaeologist named Ivan Turk brushed away the dirt and saw something unexpected. A bone with holes. A possible instrument. A window into an ancient mind. The debate that followed has lasted 30 years and shows no sign of ending. Scientists argue over tooth marks and manufacturing traces, over statistics and probabilities, over what counts as proof and what counts as speculation. But underneath the debate is something everyone agrees on. If this bone is a flute, it changes everything we thought we knew about Neanderthals. It means they were not merely surviving. They were creating. They were expressing. They were making something beautiful for no practical reason at all. And that, more than any skull measurement or gene sequence, is what would make them truly human. So I ask the question again, did Neanderthals make music? I think the answer is probably yes. Not because the Divje Babe bone proves it. It does not. But because everything we know about Neanderthal, biology, cognition, social life, and symbolic behavior points in that direction. They had the equipment, they had the brains, they had the need, they had the capability. And if they were anything like us, and they were very much like us, they would have sung. I want to talk more about what the brain evidence tells us. Because when we discuss whether Neanderthals could have made music, we are really asking about their minds. And the only physical evidence we have of Neanderthal minds comes from their skulls. Neanderthal brains were big. Really big. The average Neanderthal brain was about 1410 cubic centimeters. The average modern human brain today is about 1350 cubic centimeters. So Neanderthals actually had larger brains than we do on average. But here is the thing. Brain size alone does not determine intelligence or capability. If it did, elephants and whales would be running the planet. What matters is how the brain is organized, how different regions relate to each other, and how the brain is proportioned relative to body size. Neanderthals had bigger bodies than modern humans. They were stockier, more muscular, with wider shoulders and heavier bones. Controlling and maintaining a larger body requires more brain tissue. Some researchers estimate that a significant portion of the Neanderthal brain was devoted simply to managing their larger physiques. Alund Pierce and Robin Dunbar at Oxford University conducted an influential study on this question. They found that Neanderthals had significantly larger eye sockets than contemporary modern humans. Larger eyes require larger visual processing areas in the brain. The researchers suggested that Neanderthals evolved larger eyes because they lived at higher latitudes in Europe, where light levels were lower. This is the same reason Arctic animals today often have larger eyes than their tropical relatives. When you account for body size and visual processing needs, the amount of brain tissue left over for other cognitive functions in Neanderthals is smaller than in modern humans from the same time period. This does not mean Neanderthals were stupid, but it suggests they may have had less neural capacity for certain kinds of social processing. Dunbar has developed what is called the social brain hypothesis. The idea is that bigger brains and primates evolved primarily to handle the complexities of social life. The more complex your social relationships, the bigger your brain needs to be to keep track of them all. Based on brain size, Dunbar estimates that modern human groups can maintain about 150 stable social relationships. This is sometimes called Dunbar's number. Using the same methods, Pearce and Dunbar estimated that Neanderthals would have had smaller social networks than modern humans. Not dramatically smaller, but enough to matter. This could have affected their ability to share information, trade resources, and build the kind of large-scale social networks that help populations survive hard times. But here is where I push back a bit. The social brain hypothesis is a theory, not an established fact. And even if Neanderthals had somewhat smaller social networks, that does not mean they lacked the cognitive abilities for music. Music does not require managing 150 relationships. It requires pattern recognition, motor coordination, emotional expression, and perhaps some level of symbolic thinking. Neanderthals clearly had all of these. Another study, published in 2018 in Scientific Reports, used computational methods to reconstruct Neanderthal brain shape from their skulls. The researchers found that early modern humans had relatively larger cerebellums than Neanderthals. The cerebellum is a structure at the back of the brain that was once thought to be mainly involved in motor coordination. But recent research has shown it plays important roles in higher cognition too, including language, processing, learning, memory, and social abilities. If Neanderthals had proportionally smaller cerebellums, this might have affected some cognitive abilities. But again, we have to be careful not to overinterpret these findings. The differences were statistical tendencies based on small samples of fossils. Individual Neanderthals might have varied considerably, and a smaller cerebellum does not preclude musical ability. Many cognitive functions can be performed by multiple brain regions. The honest answer is that we do not fully understand Neanderthal cognition. Their brains were similar to ours in many ways, and different in others. They were capable of complex behaviors, including sophisticated tool-making, hunting large, dangerous animals, caring for injured group members, and creating symbolic objects. Whether they were different from us in any way that would affect musical ability is unknown. Now let me talk about something that often gets overlooked in these discussions: the role of mothers and babies. One of the most universal forms of music across human cultures is the lullaby. Mothers everywhere sing to their babies. These songs serve important functions. They calm distressed infants. They help regulate infant breathing and heart rate. They strengthen the emotional bond between mother and child. They may even help develop the infant's auditory system and prepare them for language. The neuroscience of mother-infant interaction is fascinating. When mothers and infants engage in what is called attunement, they synchronize their behaviors. The mother matures her facial expressions, vocalizations, and movements to the baby's state. This is inherently musical. It involves rhythm, pitch, variation, and dynamics. Researchers have studied the acoustic properties of mathories, the special way adults talk and sing to infants. It is characterized by exaggerated melodic contours, repetitive patterns, and emotional expressiveness. There is every reason to think Neanderthal mothers did similar things with their babies. Neanderthals had large-brained, dependent infants just like we do. Those infants needed care and soothing. The biological mechanisms that produce attunement behaviors, including the hormones oxytocin and endorphins, would have been present in Neanderthals. If Neanderthal mothers sang lullabies or made rhythmic vocalizations to calm their babies, we would never know it from the archaeological record. But it would be strange if they did not. Ellen Disnier, an anthropologist who studies the origins of art, has argued that the rhythmic, exaggerated, repetitive interactions between mothers and infants are the evolutionary foundation of both music and art. These interactions, which she calls artification, take ordinary behaviors and make them special through rhythmic elaboration and emotional expression. If she is right, music has its roots in something very ancient and very basic, the primal bond between parent and child. This view is supported by the fact that even very young human infants respond to music. Newborns can detect musical patterns. They prefer melodic over dissonant sounds. They can discriminate between different rhythms. These abilities suggest that the human brain is wired for music from birth, not trained to appreciate it through culture alone. Did Neanderthal infants have similar innate musical abilities? We cannot test them, but given the similarities in brain structure and genetics between Neanderthals and modern humans, it seems likely. Let me also expand on what we know about Neanderthals' social life and why music might have been important to them. Neanderthals lived in small groups, probably extended family units of 10 to 30 individuals. They were nomadic, following prey animals across the landscape. They hunted mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, horses, deer, and other large animals. This hunting required coordination and cooperation. A single Neanderthal could not bring down a mammoth alone. How did they coordinate their hunts? Modern human hunter-gatherers use language to plan and discuss strategies. They also use music. Many hunting peoples have pre-hunt rituals that involve singing and dancing. These rituals build group cohesion, focus attention, and may serve to rehearse hunting movements through mimicry. Shabalk Shamado, a researcher who studies the evolution of cooperation, has suggested that pre-hunt charades may have been the cradle of human musicality. Groups of hunters acting out the planned hunt, making sounds to imitate prey, coordinating their movements into rhythmic patterns. This is halfway to dance and music. Neanderthals were successful hunters for hundreds of thousands of years. They had to cooperate. They had to coordinate. Music would have been a useful tool for this, even if it started as simple rhythmic chanting or movement synchronization. Music also serves to maintain group identity. Every human culture uses music to mark its distinctiveness. Songs are passed down through generations. Musical styles identify you as belonging to this group rather than that one. For Neanderthals who lived in small, scattered populations across a vast landscape, music could have helped maintain connections and transmit cultural information. There is evidence that Neanderthals had regional cultural traditions. Different Neanderthal populations in different areas made tools in slightly different styles. They may have had different hunting strategies, different burial practices, different ways of decorating themselves. If they had regional musical traditions too, we would expect it, but we would have no way of detecting it archaeologically. Now I want to address something that I think is really important: the preservation bias in the archaeological record. When we compare what we know about Neanderthal culture to what we know about early modern human culture, We have to remember that we are comparing incomplete records, and the incompleteness is not random. It is biased toward things that preserve well. Stone tools preserve well. Neanderthals left plenty of those. Bone tools and ornaments preserve reasonably well under the right conditions. Those are rarer for Neanderthals, but they exist. Organic materials like wood, plant fibers, leather, and feathers rarely preserve at all. Any Neanderthal material culture made from these materials is simply gone. Modern human sites from the Upper Paleolithic, starting around 40,000 years ago, showed dramatic increases in preserved artifacts. More bone tools, more carved figures, more ornaments, more cave paintings. This has been called the creative explosion or the Upper Paleolithic Revolution. For a long time, researchers interpreted this as evidence that modern humans had superior cognitive abilities that Neanderthals lacked. But there are other explanations. Population size matters. More people means more stuff gets made and more stuff gets preserved. Modern humans may have had larger populations than Neanderthals. This alone could account for more archaeological material. Preservation conditions also matter. The Upper Paleolithic was not that long ago in geological terms. Artifacts from this period have had less time to decay or be destroyed. Neanderthal artifacts are tens of thousands of years older. More have been lost. And as I mentioned earlier, we have to consider that Neanderthals may have made much of their material culture from perishable materials. If they carved wooden flutes instead of bone ones, we would never know. If they made drums from stretched hides over wooden frames, those would rot away completely. If they made rattles from seeds in gourds, gone. If they wore feathers and flower garlands, nothing would remain. Ethnographic studies of modern hunter-gatherers show that most of their material culture is organic. They use wood, plant fibers, animal skins, feathers, shells, and other materials that decay quickly. If we only had the stone tools from modern hunter-gatherer sites, we would have a wildly incomplete picture of their cultures. The same is probably true for Neanderthals. This does not mean we can just assume Neanderthals had everything modern humans had. That would be going beyond the evidence. But it means we should be cautious about concluding they lacked things just because we have not found them. Let me talk about one more piece of evidence. The structures at Brunicourt Cave in France. In 2016, researchers published a study of mysterious structures found deep inside this cave, more than 300 meters from the entrance, in total darkness. Someone had broken off about 400 stalagmites and arranged them into two ring-shaped structures. Some of the stalagmites showed traces of fire. Using uranium-thorium dating, the researchers determined that these structures were built around 176,000 years ago. This is long before modern humans arrived in Europe. Only Neanderthals were there. Think about what this means. Someone, probably a group of someones, entered this cave and walked hundreds of meters into the darkness. They had to bring fire with them. They had to carry torches or oil lamps. They had to navigate through narrow passages and over underground rivers. Then they spent significant time and energy breaking stalagmites and arranging them into patterns. Why? We have no idea. The structures have no obvious practical purpose. They are not shelters, not storage areas, not hunting blinds. They appear to be purely symbolic, maybe ritual, maybe art, maybe something we cannot even conceptualize. The researchers calculated that building these structures required substantial planning, group coordination, and sustained effort. The fires that were lit on the stalagmites were not random. They were placed carefully on particular spots. Now imagine being in that cave. Total darkness except for your flickering torchlight. Strange rock formations casting shadows, echoes bouncing off the walls, the sound of dripping water, your own breathing and heartbeat loud in your ears. If you were going to make any kind of sound in that environment, it would resonate. It would be amplified. The acoustic properties of caves have fascinated humans for millennia. Many cave painting sites are also natural amplifiers where sounds carry and reverberate beautifully. Some researchers have suggested that these acoustic properties were not coincidental, that ancient people chose these spaces partly because of how they sounded. Did the Neanderthals at Brunniquell sing or chant or drum while they built their strange stalagmite circles? We will never know. But the very fact that they went to such lengths to do something so seemingly purposeless tells us their minds were capable of thinking beyond immediate practical needs. That is exactly the kind of mind that makes music. Let me now zoom out and think about the bigger picture. Why does it matter whether Neanderthals made music? It matters because music is deeply tied to our sense of what makes us human. When we say someone is cultured or civilized, we often mean they appreciate and participate in the arts, including music. When we think about what separates us from other animals, language and music are often at the top of the list. If Neanderthals made music, it challenges our sense of uniqueness. It suggests that the capacities we prize most highly in ourselves were not invented by our species alone. They were shared with our closest relatives. They may have deep roots, extending back hundreds of thousands of years to our common ancestors. This can be unsettling, but it can also be humbling and awe-inspiring. It connects us to a larger story of human evolution, one in which many different kinds of humans explored and inhabited this planet. We are not the only intelligent beings who ever walked the earth. We are just the only ones still here. Understanding Neanderthal capabilities also helps us understand ourselves. If we can identify what we share with Neanderthals and what differs, we can better understand what makes Homo sapiens unique, if anything truly does. This has implications for psychology, neuroscience, linguistics, and many other fields. And on a more personal level, I find it moving to think about Neanderthals making music. To imagine a Neanderthal mother singing to her baby, a group of hunters chanting before setting out, friends clapping and laughing around a fire. These images make them feel more real, more present, more like us. Science often strips the humanity from its subjects. We talk about brain volumes and gene sequences and tool assemblages. These are important. But behind the data we're living, feeling beings who experienced joy and sorrow, who loved and lost, who wondered about the world and their place in it. If Neanderthals made music, they were expressing those experiences. They were reaching out across the silence of existence to connect with each other and perhaps with something larger. That is what music does. That is what it has always done. So when I look at the Divje Babe bone, I choose to see a flute. Not because the evidence is conclusive, it is not, but because the possibility is meaningful. Because it matters to know that our ancient cousins may have sung the same stars we sing today, felt the same stirrings we feel when melody meets emotion. Science will continue to debate the evidence. New discoveries will come. New methods will be developed. Perhaps someday we will find an undisputed Neanderthal instrument in a context so clear that no one can argue otherwise. Or perhaps we will find evidence that definitively shows they never made music, that this was one capacity they truly lacked. Either way, the search tells us something important about ourselves. We are creatures who wonder. We look back across time and ask who came before us and what they were like. We imagine lives we can never directly observe. We tell stories to make sense of fragmentary evidence. That impulse, that curiosity, that reach across time and species, that is itself a kind of music, a song of connection, a melody of meaning. The Neanderthals are gone. Their voices fell silent tens of thousands of years ago. But if they made music, some echo of their songs lives on. In our genes, which carry Neanderthal DNA. In our cave paintings, which may have been inspired by theirs. In our universal human impulse to make rhythm and melody. We are, all of us, part of a long lineage of music makers. The song did not begin with us, and if we are wise, we will remember that it will not end with us either. Others will come after. They will inherit our songs and make their own. That is the deepest lesson of Neanderthal music, if Neanderthal music existed. We are not alone. We never were. The music connects us across species and time, across the vast darkness of extinction, across everything that divides. And maybe, in the end, that connection is what matters most. All right, for real this time, that is all I have. Thank you for sticking with me through this deep dive. Drop that comment letting me know where you are from and what time it is. I will see you in the next one.